the 7th of July 2005, 4 bombings in London killed 56 people and wounded several hundred. 3 explosions took place on underground trains shortly before 9 AM. A 4th explosion destroyed a bus about an hour later. The media's reporting of the event was extremely confused, speaking of as many as 8 explosions on the underground, which were initially blamed on electrical power surges. They also reported explosions on 3 different buses. This somehow evolved into a tale of 4 explosions caused by suicide bombers. On the evening of the attacks, the major media had already decided who was responsible.
The bombings in London. This is why I thought the Brits should have let the French have the Olympics. Let somebody else be worried about guys with backpack bombs for a while.
Weeks, months, and even years later, the most basic details of what happened are unclear, a mess of contradiction, misreporting, and conjecture. We have been told that the 4 alleged bombers acted alone, but also that there were others that knew what was going to happen.
The search is not over. I firmly believe that there are other people who have knowledge of what lay behind the attacks in July 2005. Knowledge that they have not shared with us. In fact, I don't only believe it, I know it for a fact.
The official inquiries by the Intelligence and Security Committee, or ISC, have been a farce. During their first inquiry, they were not shown photos and video surveillance footage of the alleged bombers taken before 7/7. During the second inquiry, MI5 gave an inaccurate timeline of what they knew and when. The fact is that MI5 knew a lot more about the alleged bombers than they told the ISC.
The ISC concludes that MI5 and the police cannot be criticised for the actions and decisions they took in 2004 and 5, even if there were, with hindsight, quote, missed opportunities. The victims' families say the reports are whitewash. Some sensitive material is censored. The breakdown of communication between MI5 and the police is not properly dealt with. And the claim that the Saudis warned the UK in advance of 7/7 is completely redacted.
These missed opportunities had the effect of concealing the relationships between the alleged bombers and several other significant people. The likelihood is that some of these other men were agents or assets of the security services.
They definitely wanted hardness training, some sort of, with a military bent to it, pushing people to the limits, making them work really hard, making them suffer. Basically, those were his words, he wanted them to suffer. I wondered if it was about converting people to Islam, if they had a different agenda completely, taking vulnerable young men, exposing them to literature, to extremist views, testing them, see how far they were prepared to go, and then grooming them.
The most basic questions have not yet been answered. What caused the explosions? Who carried them out and how? Why did these terrorists attack the British public? Why has the government been so resistant to releasing the evidence that could prove whether their story is true? What are they hiding?
The purpose of terrorism is just that. It is to terrorize people.
Atrocities such as these simply reinforce our sense of community.
Despite the diligent efforts of independent researchers and campaigners, we may never get the answers to these questions. J7 Freedom of Information requests have been blocked or delayed, and successive governments have refused to reopen the police investigation or hold an independent inquiry. But the only way we can get answers is to press for further investigation and inquiry, and to do it ourselves. The 7/7 inquests did not even answer the questions that they were legally obliged to answer, let alone those submitted by July 7th truth campaigners. Even after the July 7th inquests into the deaths of the 52 victims, many of the families of the victims feel that their questions have been avoided and ignored.
the evidence that we've got today in this report, I think, really causes a lot more questions to be asked than it answers.
They've had 5 years to prepare for this. They must have known that something like this was going to happen. They had 5 years to look at their documentation, get it in order, and produce it when required. And it appears to me that they stalled on it. I wasn't happy with the performance of the security services.
The security services don't want to have any blame. They don't want to say if they made an apology, it meant that they were guilty of something. And if they're guilty of something, it meant that somebody is to blame. And nobody wants to be blamed. So 77 is to be forgotten.
For others, to continue fighting for the truth is too painful.
I mean, everybody's got issues with various areas. I think there are people with issues with the intelligence services. There are people with issues with the emergency services. My own particular issue with Transport for London. So I think there are still issues. The problem we have, and the problem I have, is that if I continue to hold concerns about issues that went on, my life will become very bitter.
So do what you can to spread information, to investigate 7/7, and to ask these questions of the people that should have the answers, but have so far refused to give them.